It's never been easier to have a large canvas wrap print made from one of our own photographs. They look pretty impressive, they're not over the top in cost, and they're very light and easy to hang. However, we do need to make allowance for the part of the image that's going to form the wrap around the edge. Now the printer will probably be able to take care of all this for you, but as keen photographers, we've already done all of the hard work, so we like to prep the artwork ourselves, don't we? It's a good idea to see how the image is going to look before we send the file off to the printers. My printer asks for a 50mm area to allow for the wrap. Some printers may ask for 40mm or something in between. Then we need to decide the size of the canvas wrap we want. In my case, not forgetting to allow 50mm extra around the edges. What I've noticed over time is that printed images tend to look quite a bit smaller when we finally get them up on the wall. So sometimes it's worth measuring the space you have on the wall to get a feel for the size of the image that's needed to fill it nicely. Now the reason I want to do the preparation for this print myself is so that once I've got the allowance for the 50mm around the edge, I want to be able to see the composition that remains, because that edge can take quite a bit away. I want to look at or for distractions around the edge and decide if I can deal with them or not. And of course, in extreme circumstances, that 50mm allowance may actually cut off part of the image that we want to display. Now we also have a choice of what to do with that 50mm edge. In normal circumstances, we use parts of the image to form the wrap, but we don't have to. If the image is not going to support that and we cannot deal with any issues it throws up, then we can create the wrap in a neutral colour. Let's take a look. So here I have an image that would be nicely suited to a canvas wrap. I've got the image size panel open. We can see the image is 30 inches on the long side and 20 inches in height. The resolution is 300 pixels per inch, so we're going to get a good quality image here. If I'm going to allow the sky in this image to form the wrap, then I'm going to lose 50mm on the left, right, top and bottom. That's very close to 2 inches. So the overall width of my image is going to be 26 inches. So let's set up the artwork, but one thing that's quite important here is to be aware of the resolution. And you'll see why in a second or two. I'll cancel that. What I want to do here is to create a new document. So up to the top left, File, New. I want to make it 50mm in width, 50mm in height. The colour is irrelevant, but the resolution is very important because it has to match the image. And I'm going to click Create. Once I have that, I'm going to drag the tab from the top of the screen. With the Move tool selected from the top of the toolbox, click, drag and drop. I can close this down because what I've got here is my 50mm. But here's the great thing about Photoshop. I can pick this up and move it to the top corner and it'll snap into position. Now I'm going to open up the rulers onto the screen. You'll find them in the View menu, but there really is a very quick and easy to remember shortcut, Control R. Now we can click within the rulers and actually change those to any value we want. We don't actually need to change them here because we've already got the square that's going to determine the 50mm, but we can do so just to reassure ourselves that we've got things right. From within the rulers, I can click and drag out a guide, which also snaps to the edge. So you can see within a few seconds I've got the top and the left-hand side, Pick up the square and drag it to the bottom right. Once again, it'll snap into position. Go over to the left, click and drag out a guide, which also snaps into position. The top also. Let me drag that in the bin so we're not bothered by it. And there we can see exactly what our canvas wrap is going to look like. And now we can see that while we'd probably get away with it, it's not perfect, is it? The wing at the top is a little bit too close to where the fold is going to be to form the wrap. Now we do have a number of ways we can deal with this, but I think what I'd do here is I'd remove the lock from the background. In doing so, all I'm doing here is separating the image from the canvas it's sitting on. Now I've still got the move tool selected here, but I'm going to use my up and down arrows and I'm going to nudge the image down because I want to position the bird in that nice sweet spot where I've got just the right amount of gap at the top and the bottom. But of course I've given myself a bit of an issue here, but to be honest it's not much of an issue for Photoshop or us either. The way I tackle this is to pick up my rectangular marquee tool. I'd make a selection of that area, just overlapping a tiny amount. And in the generative fill box above, I would click, but not ask for anything, just hit the enter key. Now, given the nature of the blue sky, I'm pretty confident that the AI in Photoshop is not going to find this difficult at all. I'm pretty certain, let's hope I don't actually have to eat my words, that it's going to give me a great result straight away. And there we have it. If you're not familiar with AI generative fill, it does give us here in the properties 3 versions of what we've asked it to do. In our case, all 3 of them would suit our needs, but in some cases we can choose the best of 3, and if it doesn't get it right, we can regenerate another 3. But here I'm pretty happy to go to my layers, and on this occasion I'm going to select both of them, right click, and either flatten the image ready to send off to the printers, or I can merge the visible layers. Let's flatten it ready to send off, because if we go back to the image menu and we look at the image size once again, we're still within our 30 by 20, 300 pixels per inch, but we can see exactly what we're going to see on the face of our print when it's on the wall. Now, if we wanted to just look at that in isolation without the guides and the edge getting in our way, here's one way to do it. We can easily back away from this, so don't worry. Pick up your rectangular marquee tool and click and drag, because even the selection will snap to the guides. It's very quick and easy to do. Then if we go to the image menu, we can actually crop from a selection. Control D will remove that selection. Let me go to my window here. Go down to, whoops, wrong one, beg your pardon, View menu, Guides, Clear Guides. Now we get a clear view of exactly what we're going to see on the face of our canvas wrap. Don't worry about losing the edge. Just use the Control Z keys a couple of times and we've got it back. Because this is the file we need to save, ready to send off or take to the printers. Now I'm pretty good at composing my images in the camera because I'd rather not have to discard pixels that I've paid good money to capture. But with canvas wraps, of course, we've seen a few examples where allowing 50mm or even 40mm around the edge is going to impact into the content of the picture. But here we've got something a little different. A montage, and I can't use any of this image with the wrap. I have no choice but to create a neutral edge. So let's do that. We have an image 20 by 13, 300 pixels per inch. I'm going to begin by removing the lock, which just separates the canvas from the image. If I select my Move tool, for example, and click and drag, There you can see what I mean. I've got my image, but beneath it we've now got a transparent background. I'll slot that back into place. Because what we can do now is increase the height and width of the canvas, but not the image, and that will form the 50mm I need. So if we go to the image menu and down to canvas size, the one thing we've got to remember here is to double up the 50mm, because we've got to add 50 on the right, left, top and bottom. Now we've got lots of options here. It's already set on millimeters, but of course I need to put 100 in there, 100 in the height, because this little anchor point tells me I'm going to leave my image sitting in the center. So the 100mm is going to be distributed top and bottom, and here left and right. I'll hit Ctrl 0 to fit that on screen, and there you can see exactly what we have. Down at the bottom of the layers palette, I'm going to click to create a new blank layer, but then I'm going to drag that beneath my image, click drag and drop, because we're going to need to use this to create that neutral edge. Now I can just pick a neutral color. Let's make things very simple and quick. If I click the color panel over on the toolbox here, you can see it's set to a really dark grey. Let's just accept that for a moment, because I can now flood this with that color, and it will only show in the area that's going to form the wrap. Now we can use the paint bucket tool, which is grouped over here with this. But I prefer shortcuts because this one is very quick and easy. Alt backspace will flood the foreground colour into a selection, or in our case here, the whole layer. Now, so we can see the wrap area here against my background, I'm just going to right click over here in no man's land, and I'll check, I think, medium grey. So it just gives you a better idea of where the print is in relation to the wrap. And the wrap, as we know, is 50mm because we added 100mm all round, and that spread top, bottom, left and right. So from this point we could add a number of textures if we felt that was appropriate. We can try sampling an image, a colour from the image. Now that sometimes works, but it generally needs to be a darker colour with an image like this, but we can give it a try. So let's pick up the eyedropper tool here. The settings at the top of the page are not critical for this. So I'm going to pick something fairly darkish. Let's have a look. You can see it appears on the foreground as my colour picker. Looks a little bit too red to me, but let's have a look. Alt backspace will flood it. You can get the idea by sampling colours and applying them to your wrap. Sometimes though, I've found that once I get close to where I think I'd like to be, then I would use my hue and saturation and also the levels. They're both found in the image menu at the top of the screen, but they both have pretty quick and easy shortcuts. So Ctrl U will bring up the hue and saturation. That enables me to just change the hue a little bit to see if there's something else there that is a little more appropriate to the image. Now, I don't know about you, but although it's not a colour sampled from the image, that dark blue doesn't look too bad, but maybe a bit too blue for my taste, so I could drop it down using the saturation. The reason I like to use this option here is because we're seeing exactly what we're doing as we do it. And of course we get the opportunity to darken or lighten the edge that's going to form the wrap. And we can do a similar thing with the levels too. Now one thing I would suggest when we're prepping the image for print purposes is not to send it directly off to the printers. Try to live with what you've done for a few days. Come back tomorrow and take a look and see if what you did yesterday is still meeting your requirements. And if you save this as a Photoshop file, of course, you can always add a new background. It's dead easy. One other technique that I've used from time to time is once I've got the 50mm added all around the image, I make a copy with Control J, select the bottom copy of the two, and then I'm going to bring up my free transform tool, Control T will do that, and with the bounding box I'm going to stretch the image so that it matches the edge of the canvas. To do that I can hold my Shift key and I can click this and drag and it'll snap to the edge. I can do the same on the right, on the left and the bottom. Now I can use that as the wrap. Now sometimes I found there's a need to move the whole thing down, so maybe the tree line matches up, which may mean another tweak here, and you get the idea. You have to fiddle around a little bit to get something that you're happy with. But then we get the opportunity, once we've committed the transformation, let's hit the tick, we can soften it. Let's go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, so we can soften the background. OK that. I could add some texture to the background. Let's go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. We don't want much, probably 5% is going to be enough. And I can even darken it, let's say with the levels. Control L will bring them on screen. Remember, you'll find these in the Edit menu. So I can darken the edge and you get the idea. We still get a wrap and we still get to see some of the edge, but remember, when this is actually on the wall, it's unlikely you're going to see the top edge. If you're standing and looking at the image, you probably won't see much of the bottom either. It's just pushing the whole thing away from the wall and giving it the effect we like. And of course, in certain locations in our homes, you may only see one side or the other. So these things are all to be taken into account. But then you could flatten this and send this off to the printers. But let me finish with just one more suggestion using tools which are bang up to date in 2023, AI Generative Fill. I'm going to pick up my rectangular marquee tool from the toolbox, click and drag just inside the edge of the image, not very much. Then I'm going to inverse that selection. So I'm going to go to Select. There it is, shortcut Control-Shift-I, but there's the inverse. So I've got all of the 50mm that's going to form the wrap and just a tiny bit of the image. Click into the generative fill and hit the Enter key. Pretty clever, isn't it? And there we can see the image with the guides in place, which will tell us which part of the picture is 50mm on the top, bottom, left and right. I'll see you next time.